Hey everyone, it's Brett from Hope to Prosper, and I'm here at Doheny State Beach. Sorry it's a little windy. I'm going to go for a walk with my dogs and my brother and tell you about what's on my mind. But basically, I want to talk about the FIRE movement, and is the FIRE movement dying out? Seems like it is. So I thought I would give you my thoughts on that. All right, thanks for coming along.
Today I want to talk about the death of the FIRE movement. Okay, the rumors of its demise may have been greatly exaggerated, but it sure doesn't seem to have the momentum it had just a few years ago. I've been watching it for a long time, and all of a sudden I'm seeing a lot of YouTube videos saying, it's dead, it's dying, it's over. And I kind of have to agree that it seems to have lost its allure for a lot of people. A lot of the people who were on that bandwagon seem to be stepping off. But there's still some diehard fans hanging on to the FIRE dream, and I don't blame them. So let's get started. So FIRE, financial independence, retire early. Most of you already know what it is, so I'm not going to go into a long-winded explanation. I'll leave that to other YouTubers and bloggers. Most of you already know what it is. So I'm just going to give my opinion of it, my honest opinion, and tell you what I think of FIRE. First, I want you to know that I was never really considered myself part of the FIRE movement. Because for decades I've wanted to become financially independent, but I just had no desire to retire early. Especially back in my 30s and 40s, where a lot of the FIRE people are aspiring to retire, I was enjoying my career. I was accomplishing things. I had moved into management. I really felt like my contribution to the companies were well received. And so I had no interest in retiring. My original plan was to retire at 67 with a couple $1 million put away. And, retire with some cushion and have a comfortable retirement and enjoy it. I had no idea I would retire at 58, to be honest. I had talked about 55 and 56, but basically I just ended up retired before I even realized it. So early retirement wasn't really one of my goals in my 30s and 40s for sure. So I guess the moral of the story is, at least from my perspective, is that money gives you options, When you have money and you're financially independent, it's a blessing, no matter how you feel about early retirement, because you have options from there on out. And I've dreamed about being financially independent for decades, and I can tell you it's glorious. It's everything I thought it would be. It's been worth every sacrifice that I made in my 20s and 30s and 40s to get here. Just the financial security alone really is worth everything. The peace of mind. So a long time ago, way back in 2007, I wrote a blog post on my blog. It's still up, and it's called I Have a Dream. And my dream was to become financially independent. And so I was thinking about it way back in 2007, and back then I didn't have a lot of money put away. I was grinding, and I was already thinking about it. I'll put a link in the description below in case anybody wants to read the post, but the bottom line is that I had that dream, and then 15 years later I realized the dream. But I believe a lot of the reasons people become disenchanted with FIRE is because they don't have a dream like that, and they don't have a purpose for their lives after they reach FIRE. They may hit their number, and they may be free, but then what? What's next? Is it going to make them happy to retire so early with nothing really purposeful to do with their lives? I mean, beyond just escaping the rat race. I think that's part of the disenchantment with FIRE. So, by the way, before I get into the next subject, I wanted to ask you quickly, if you're enjoying this video and you enjoy my content, please subscribe. That would help me out a lot, and then it will allow you to watch all my future videos. Next week, I'm going out to the desert, a desert trip, another big adventure. There's a super bloom out there. So every week I come up with something, and I think you'd enjoy it. So if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. All right, thanks. So the next subject is the rise and fall of FIRE. I think one of the most interesting things about FIRE is the rise and fall. By the way, this won't be as long as the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. I'll keep it short. But it all started quietly in 1992 with a popular personal finance book called Your Money or Your Life. And this is a great book. I have it. I bought it. I read it. I loved it. And there's two things in this book that are really critically important for anybody who's studying personal finance. The first thing is it offers a blueprint for becoming financially independent. And it has calculations. You can figure out how long it's going to take, how long you have to save. So your money or your life, really, that kind of sparked the FIRE movement. And it allowed all those things. Another awesome thing about the book is it teaches you how much things cost in life energy. For example, maybe you buy a new car and it's $40,000. You're not that worried about it. It's $600 a month or whatever. But when you add up all the wages from your life and you figure out those are post-tax wages, not pre-tax, you might spend 8-9 months of your life or even a year paying for that car. And, is that car worth it? So it allows you to question consumerism, I guess. So that was the start of... It was a quiet start to the FIRE movement. And then 20 years later, it just seemed to burst onto the scene. All of a sudden there was all these FIRE people, maybe 10, 15 years later. There's bloggers like Mr. Money Mustache and Early Retirement Extreme, The Mad Fientist, and one of my blogger buddies, Financial Samurai. And they're all on there and they're retired and they're espousing all the virtues of being retired and the FIRE movement. And you could quit your crappy, demeaning job and live a free life, travel and adventure. So a lot of people bought into that dream. And, it wasn't just a dream. It was possible for some people. And then the next thing you know, there's discussion groups and meetup groups, and there was legions of followers and dedicated fans. So the FIRE really did become a movement. So what caused FIRE to lose popularity? That's the grand question of this whole video. I have an opinion. According to the Duke of Early Retirement, FIRE peaked around 2019. This guy, the Duke of Early Retirement, he did a bunch of Google searches, and he saw that that was kind of the peak of Google searches for the FIRE movement. And so that was his opinion of when the peak happened, 2019, 5 years ago. And I think there's some clues in the timing, First of all, I think the pandemic played a big part. People were all of a sudden able to work from home, and they didn't have to commute. And so that made work a lot more tolerable for a lot of people. The big grind and the big commute and the long days and the mindless meetings kind of took a back seat during the pandemic. And I think that helped people enjoy work more, or at least have a better work-life balance in their lives. I think the second thing was the stock market. You had two kind of crashes there. You had the pandemic crash. It was short-lived, but it was still 30%. And then you had the later crash. I think it was around 2022, 2021. And so I think these really popped reality into the face of a lot of people who were just building up a nest egg, and then they all of a sudden realized, holy cow, this isn't a sure thing. There's a lot of risk in this. I could be saving for decades and then lose everything in 1 year. So let's talk about the dark side of FIRE, right? Here are some things that don't get presented in the dream, but they are a reality of FIRE. And so I think these are some of the things that are actually discouraging some people. And I think these have helped lead to the demise. Because one thing that happens is while people are building up FIRE, they're looking at the dream, right? And then once they get there, then they're dealing with the reality. So anyways, the obvious benefits, you're going to reject consumerism and escape the rat race. But there's also some huge drawbacks that people don't talk about. First of all, it requires extreme frugality, right? Not just initially to save up, but also in the future. One of the problems with the FIRE math is, you're saving 50 to 70% of your net income, and then you hit your FIRE number, which means all of a sudden you have to live on that 20 or 30%, or that 30 or 50%. So that's the thing about FIRE. You're expected, when you hit that number, you have to stay frugal. And that's a big drawback, especially for me. My goal in life when I became financially independent was not to have to scrape by like when I was young. It was to have a more comfortable life. So that's a big problem. The frugality now and in the future is a big problem, a big dark side of FIRE. Another thing is you lose balance between time and money. Is giving up 10 years of your life in your 20s and 30s worth, an extra 10 years of your life in your 40s or 50s? I mean, that's just a really good question. Are you going to miss going out with all your friends or traveling when you're young and healthy so that you can buy back those years later in your life? So the balance of time and money is a questionable issue in addition to the frugality. And then the third thing, and this is what happened with me, is just straight up not possible. When you look at the people who are achieving FIRE, and I knew some of them kind of personally, online at least, and they have dual incomes and no kids. So sure, you could save 70% or 50%. If you have two professional incomes and you live on one and save the other, yeah, it's pretty easy. I had opposite math. I had a single income for a family of 4. It wasn't possible at all. So that's why I never jumped on that train. It wasn't ever even a possibility for me. And if you're a laborer or you work retail or something else, it's just not a possibility. You have to have a pretty high income to reach FIRE in a small amount of time. So that's a discouraging thing for a lot of people. Another thing I saw was people were claiming to reach FIRE. Hey, I hit my FIRE. I'm retired. And then you look and you read into it and you go, wait a minute, your spouse still works. So you're not really retired. You're a stay-at-home mom or you're a stay-at-home dad, and you're not retired. You're retired when you're both retired, put it that way. So another thing, and this is anecdotal, but I saw a video from Dividend Growth Investing, and he talked about the high divorce rate of FIRE. One of the dark sides is when people reach FIRE and then they get bored. Maybe life is kind of purposeless, or they're not keeping up with their friends. It seems to have a high divorce rate in FIRE. So that's not a dream at all. That's a nightmare. And I did read Mr. Money Mustache's blog post about his divorce, and that's what happened. His wife became unhappy. Their friends were getting, Teslas and McMansions and stuff, and they're still, living a frugal lifestyle. So that's the dark side of FIRE. If there's any other things that you could think of, you could put them in the comments. And then we'll wrap it up. So in conclusion, first of all, thanks for staying with me. So in conclusion, money is a tool. It doesn't buy anyone happiness unless you have a purpose for the money. If you have a dream and a purpose for your life, that money may help you, enjoy it. If you don't, you could have all that money, you could have that wealth, you could have that freedom, and still not have happiness, still not have purpose. It might just be like a hollow victory. So that's the part that may be missing for some. And in my opinion, that's one of the reasons people become disenchanted with FIRE and drop out.
Okay, thanks for coming along. I really appreciate you guys. Hope you enjoyed today's subject, and we'll see you soon. I wish you all health, happiness, and prosperity in your lives, and we will see you next week on our next big adventure. Okay.